Okay, hello and welcome to today's lecture. Today we are going to cover chapter number 9, and this is within that chapter, this is lecture number 2. Okay, so the topic for chapter number 9 is virtual memory. Okay, so quick recap of what we have discussed so far. So we know that essentially we have two kinds of memories. Basically, and then there are some other kinds of memories as well. So these two major kinds of memories are, we have virtual memory and then we have physical memory. Now, to run any application, it has to be brought into physical memory. The issue is physical memory is limited in size due to its cost. So the access times for physical memory are much less than the access time for, let's say, disk. But what that also means is that physical memory is more costly, and we need to keep the cost of the computer down. So which means we have a limited amount of physical memory, and on which we have to perform multi-programming. So we have to keep multiple processes in memory, in physical memory, and then we have to sort of juggle or switch between them. Okay. In earlier machines, what happened was there was no concept of virtual memory. So the programmers had to write their applications keeping the size of the physical memory in mind. So it says that those times even the physical memory was a lot less than what it is today. So let's say you have 256 MB. It was a realistic number, of which the OS takes 128 or whatever. So now you have only 128 MB and you have to write your program based on that the memory footprint of your program has to be within that. And if you're using multi-programming, it's even tougher. So what virtual memory did was it freed the programmer from this burden. Now programmers can write applications whose memory footprints can be even more than the amount of physical memory available. Okay, so while writing their code, the size of the physical memory may not be or is no longer a concern for them. So they are more free to concentrate on what the application is and what it does. And eventually many optimizations were done so that people agreed that it may not be necessary to bring a complete process in physical memory. Okay, so only a part of a process can be brought in. And then we divided the virtual memory into pages, physical memory into frames. We know about all that, and how using a page table we do a mapping between virtual address to physical address. And finally we talked about demand paging, in which we bring the pages on demand. So whenever there is a requirement for a page, right? So which means initially when a process is running, how many pages does that process have in physical memory? 0. And as and when we have a requirement for a page, we bring that page into physical memory. So that event, that phenomenon in which a request for a page leads to the event that or once we have a request for a page, we find out that the page is not in memory. So that event is called a page fault. So we have to handle that page fault. And eventually we'll soon see later in this chapter, we have to be careful and we need to minimize the number of page faults. So that is what we have looked at so far. And in today's class, we will discuss demand paging in more detail. We will try to look at the performance of demand paging. And then we'll move on and talk about page replacement. Okay. So which means that, we have a requirement for a page. For a process, the page is not in memory, so we need to bring it from disk. But what the situation we encounter is, we don't have any free physical frame available. So in that case, we have to do what we call page replacement. One page has to be evicted from main memory back to disk, which will, so if we evict that page, the corresponding physical frame is available, and then we assign that to the new page. So that is called page replacement. So we'll be talking about that also. Okay. Okay, so now I am on slide 2, and now we talk about the performance of demand paging. So once again, in demand paging, what we are doing is we are not bringing any pages into main memory beforehand, right? We are not fetching them, and whenever we have a demand for a page, only then do we bring it in. Okay. So now we look at the performance of demand paging. Okay. So because the idea is that which pages are going to be accessed, we really don't know. So if we cannot bring so in the worst case we bring all the pages of the process in, but then we will quickly use up the physical memory. And plus, if we bring all the pages of a process in and only 5% of the pages are actually used, then we would have wasted space corresponding to 95% of that process's pages. How much memory we can find out depending on what are the total number of pages for that process, 95% of that, and then we get the number of pages which were not used, and then we know the page size, so we can get the memory which was wasted for that process, physical memory that was wasted for that process. So bringing the whole process in would not be that smart. So then what we do is whenever a page is accessed, only then we bring it in. Okay. So that again, as we said, nothing comes for free. That has a side effect of page faults. So now we look at the performance of demand paging. So we say demand paging can affect the computing system performance as disk operations are involved, and these are on the slower side. So we know that we are bringing pages on demand. So we have a probability of having a page fault. Right? We have a probability of having a page fault because initially no pages are within memory. So every time we have to do a page fault, that means we have to do a disk operation. The page has to be loaded from disk. We saw those steps in the last lecture, right? So obviously disk operations are quite slow as compared to main memory operations, right? So which means that we have to be careful while doing this or implementing this demand paging. So to better understand the cost of this or performance of this, let's try to discuss an equation. Okay, so let's define a quantity here, effective mean access time, EMAT. Okay, so this is given by the following equation. Effective mean access time is equal to 1 minus P times MA plus P into page fault time. Right, so what this mean access time has is, it's got two components. So one component is when the page you're looking for is within main memory, right? And the other component is when the page is not in main memory, it's on disk. So which means you have to you'll have a page fault and you have to service that page fault. So the time it takes for that. Yeah, so obviously those are the components because you have two scenarios. The page you're looking for, it's either in main memory or it's not. Right, so P here denotes the probability of a page fault. So which means it's between 0 and 1. So what are the extreme values for this P? Lowest value is 0. Which means best case scenario, how many page faults do you have? 0. So let's say you access 100 pages for a process, and by chance all of them are within memory. Okay. So which means that your P is 0, and you put that in. So the page fault time becomes 0 automatically, and what you have is 1 into MA. So memory access time, main memory access time. So which would be the best case? Obviously the effective mean access time would be the lowest, right? Now what about the other side, other end of the spectrum? That is when P is equal to 1. Probability of a page fault is 1, which means that each and every page reference will lead to a page fault, which means we have no pages in memory. So which means if you are accessing 100 different frames, So we are saying 100 different frames. No frame is being accessed twice, and we find that all of them are not in memory. So for every frame access, you have to service a page fault. So then P is 1, the first term becomes 0, and what you have is 1 into page fault time, right? So every page reference will lead to a page fault. Okay. So of course, if we were to ask ourselves what is the performance bottleneck in the above equation, definitely the page fault time, because it involves a lot of operations which we'll soon see, and to service all of them it takes quite a significant amount of time. So what we need to do is we need to minimize the number of page faults. Okay. So we need to minimize the number of page faults. Lower value is P. Lower value of P we can have, better will be our effective mean access time. Okay. Okay, now I am on slide 3, and now we are seeing the different events that are associated with servicing a page fault, right? So what are all those events? First, we have a trap to the operating system, because what happens is let's say we're running an instruction as we saw in the last lecture, and the page that instruction is not in main memory, right? So how will we find that? Because the page table entry for that page will be marked as invalid, not in memory. So which means we trap to the OS, and what we need to do is we need to bring the page with it from the disk to the memory. So we trap to the OS, we save the user registers and process state. So whichever instruction caused this page fault, we have to save the context of the process, because we have to restart once that page is within the memory. Then we determine that the interrupt, trap is an interrupt, we determine that it was due to a page fault. Event number 4, we check that the page reference was legal, which means it was within the address space of the process, right? We have to do that, and determine the location of page on the disk. So the virtual address has to be determined. Now once we do that, we issue a read from the disk to a free frame. So we find the location of that disk, of the page within the disk. We find a free frame from the free frame list, and now we issue a read from the disk to the free frame. We have to copy the page from the disk to that free frame which is in physical memory. So we have a disk IO. Now disk may be handling other requests. So if there are other requests, we have to wait in the disk queue. So wait in a queue for this device until the read request is serviced. And then the disk operation happens. We wait for device seek and latency time. So if we have like a hard disk rotating one, then that rotating latency is there. Seek latency and data transfer latencies are all there. Right. So we have to wait for those to happen. Then we begin the transfer of the page to a free frame. Now while we are waiting, while all this disk, so this is disk IO, and we are doing multi-programming. So what do? We can now give the CPU to some other process. So while waiting, allocate the CPU to some other user or some other process of the same user. Event 6. Event 7, receive an interrupt from the disk IO subsystem. IO is completed. So eventually the IO will be processed, and the disk IO subsystem will interrupt, saying that IO is completed now. So now save the registers and process state for the other user, whichever was we had allotted, because then that has to be run later. Determine that the interrupt was from the disk, signifying that disk IO is completed. Correct the page table and other tables to show pages now in memory. So update the page table entry. Now what you will put for that page is you will mark it as valid, and the entry will correspond to now the base physical address. Okay. And now of course you have to wait for the CPU to be allocated to this process again, depending on the scheduling algorithm, right? Once an IO is completed, the process doesn't go to the ready queue. it goes to the wait queue. I'm sorry, once the IO is completed, the process does not necessarily have to run. It has to go to the ready queue, and from there eventually it will be picked up by the scheduler. It cannot go directly into the running state. Right? It goes to the ready state. So wait for the CPU to be allocated to this process again. Wait time may be there. And then finally, once the CPU is allocated, restore the user register's process state. Access a new page table, the entry for that, and then resume the uninterrupted instruction. So you can see this page fault triggers a lot of events. Each of them have their overhead, and they involve disk IO, which is generally on the slower side. So you can see that page fault service time can be quite significant. Okay. So these are the various events that occur as a result of a page fault. Okay, now I am on slide 4, and now we will look at an example of demand paging. So the reasoning for looking at this example is to sort of show, the effect of the page fault probability on the mean access time. Okay. So we make certain assumptions. Let's say the memory access time MA is 200 nanoseconds, which means if you are accessing the physical memory, it's 200 nanoseconds. Okay. And let's say the average page fault service time is 8 milliseconds. Right, 8 milliseconds. So we are saying average is 8 milliseconds because every time you service a page fault, you may get a different page fault service time. So one time you may not have to enter a device queue, waiting for device IO. Other time you may have to wait, and even when you have to wait, it depends on how many requests are ahead of you in that device queue, in that disk queue. And more requests being ahead of you means it will add more to the page fault service time. So what that means is, the time will change. So let's say average page fault time for ease of explanation is for a page fault is 8 milliseconds. Now when you plug that into our previous equation, we get 1 minus P into 200 plus P into 8 milliseconds. So we have 200 nanoseconds and 8 milliseconds. So we convert into the same units. So we convert the 8 milliseconds into nanoseconds. 8 into 10 raised to 6. So once we evaluate this, we get 200 plus P times 7,999 800. Okay. So this is what we get. Now what we see is depending on the value of P, our time will change. So let's say one scenario. One access out of 1,000 causes a page fault. So which means we have so think about this, we have 1,000 page accesses, right? Number of page accesses is 1,000, and out of them 999 for 999 of those accesses, the page is in physical memory, right? So no page fault. For those 999 occasions, the access time is 200. But for only one time, we have to do the page is not in memory, so we have to service a page fault. So for that one and only one access, it takes us 8 milliseconds. So plugging that in, 200 plus 7,999 800 divided by 1,000. So because P is 1 by 1,000, so we get 8199.8 nanoseconds, which is equal to roughly 8.2 microseconds. So how much of a slowdown is this versus the case that we don't have any page faults? So which means versus the case in which we have 1,000 page references and for all 1,000 page references, the page is in memory. So that is one scenario. Other scenario is we have 1,000 page references and 999 of those times of those pages are in memory, main memory. One time the page is on disk. So slow down between the two. Which one will be slower? The second one, of course, because now for one memory page access, instead of 200 nanoseconds, we have 8 milliseconds. So this is a slowdown of roughly 4.999, which is roughly 40. So even if we have our page fault probability is 1 by 1000, which is really good, still we have a slowdown of 40. Now scenario 2, if we want a performance degradation of less than 10%, right, of less than 10%, versus the best case in which our access time is 200 nanoseconds. So the best case is in which we have 0 page faults. So now if we want, as compared to that best case, if we want a performance degradation of less than 10%, so 10% degradation of 200 is 220. So which means, so our effective memory access time EMAT is 200 plus P times 7999800. So this whole term has to be less than 220. In other words, 220 is greater than this effective mean access time, which is 200 plus 7999800 times P. So which means 20 is less than 7999800 times P, which means P is less than 0.000025. So you can double check the calculations. So which essentially means that we have less than one page fault. So one page fault in every 400,000 memory accesses, roughly. Right? So that's what we're saying. We can allow fewer than one memory access out of 399,9902 page fault. So which seems like it's a very unrealistic scenario, right? So what we are seeing is definitely we have to keep the page fault rate to the minimum. Okay. So obviously if the page fault rate is high, let's say it's half. So then what we are getting, what is the effective mean access time for P is 1 by 2. So 200 by 2 plus 8 into 6 by 2. Right. So you can see in that case the effective memory access time is quite high. Right. If it's 0.9, then it will be closer to the worst case, which is average access is taking 8 milliseconds. So what we learn from this example is we have to keep P as low as possible, which means we have to minimize the number of page faults is what we have to do, which further means we have to ensure that as many of the pages among the set of pages that we access, as many of them as possible are in physical memory. Now do remember that we are going for demand paging, which means initially no pages will be in memory. So which means initially we are bound to get some page faults. We cannot escape that. But hopefully if we intelligently bring pages into memory, then the pages which are used very frequently, they will be kept in memory and we won't have to page fault for them every time. So if we can, so again the question is, what is the probability of a page being brought into memory? If a page is very popular, its probability of being brought into memory is very high. So such pages we should keep in physical memory. Right. So if a page is going to be accessed very frequently, we have to keep it in physical memory, because otherwise every time we access it we have to do a page fault. And because it's going to be accessed a lot, so naturally performance would really go down. So pages which are going to be accessed frequently should be in physical memory. Pages which are not going to be accessed at all should definitely not be in memory. Pages which are going to be accessed less frequently, we can also not keep them in memory. So very soon we'll look at some of the algorithms that accomplish this. Okay. Okay, now I am on page 5. I'm sorry, on slide 5. So the title states that what happens if there is no free frame. So eventually we know what happens. We generate pages one at a time, and for each page we see whether that page is in physical memory or not. If it's in physical memory, we have a valid entry in the page table for that process, right? And then we act. So for each page we find out the corresponding physical frame. We know the physical address, we go to that address, we run that, execute that, whatever is inside that frame. Now, if the page for which the page we are referencing in a process, that page is not in main memory, we have what? We have a page fault. So now naturally as we've seen, what we have to do is we have to bring that page into memory. So which means we need to find a corresponding free physical frame. Now the question is, what happens if if there are no more physical frames available? So think about the scenario. There are a limited number of physical frames, and because we have many processes, multi-programming, so each process has to be allotted a set of physical frames. Now let's say if the process exhausts that, which means for that process all the physical frames which were allocated by the OS, by the memory manager, they are exhausted, and now we have a request for a page which is not in memory. So there's only one thing left to do. We have to evict one of the in-memory pages for that particular process. So evict means we have to copy that page back to disk, because the disk may have an old copy. We'll soon discuss that. And copying that page back to disk means now the corresponding physical frame is available, and now that can be used to service the new page request. So this process is called page replacement. So what we are saying is we have a page fault but no free frames available, because all the available frames are being used up by the pages of that process. Okay. So in addition to processes, frames are also in demand for running kernel processes, of course. So because user processes are not the only things we need to run. We need to run kernel processes. They are in demand for IO buffers and other kind of things. So any kind of entity which has to execute needs the frames. So you can easily have a shortage. So then we have to do what we call page replacement. Find some page in memory but not really in use and page it out. Okay. So we need some algorithm for this. So some of the questions which we have is, from which do we evict a page from the same process, or do we evict a page from some other process? If we evict a page from some other process, which process do we pick? And do we swap that process out? Okay. So which page do we pick is the most important question. And whatever algorithm we go for, we want that it should have a good performance, which means it should have a minimum number of page faults. So we are looking at a page replacement algorithm, which what it does is, whenever a request for a page is there and all the frames are allocated, it evicts one of the pages in memory. Which page does it evict depends on which algorithm it is. So for each algorithm, we'll determine how good it is by seeing how many page faults it leads to. So because if for example, if the algorithm replaces a heavily used page, is that good or bad? So if the algorithm replaces a heavily used page, that's obviously not good, because as soon as you evict the page, after a very small amount of time, again you'll have a request for that page. So what we're looking at is the frequency of requests for a particular page. If a page is heavily used, frequency of requests will be very large. If a page is lightly used, frequency of requests will be lower. If a page is not used, well, no request. So intuitively, do we replace a heavily used page or a lightly used page? Answer should not be hard to see. It is, we replace a lightly used page. Okay. So lightly used means once it's being used, it's already in memory, then you replace it. Then it may be a very long time till that page is again brought back in. So it makes more sense to replace a lightly used page. Okay, so now we will discuss about this page replacement. Okay. Okay, so now I am on slide 6, and now we see a diagram which shows us the need for page replacement. Okay. So if you think about it, when do we need to do page replacement? Page replacement will happen when a process requests for a page, and the memory management system finds that there is no free frame available, and because of that, we cannot accommodate that page, because to accommodate each page, it has to be brought into a physical frame. We have to copy the contents from the page to the frame. So if no free frame is available, then obviously one option is we have to replace a page, which means one of the pages which is already allocated to a physical frame has to be copied back to disk. Okay. Of course, that's not the only option. When we have a request for a page and there are no free frames, we can terminate a process, but the user might not be too happy with that option. So we pick the page replacement option. So as we see, what's happening here is this is a figure, and we see the logical memory, the virtual memory for two processes, process 1, process 2. Okay, so each of them have 4 pages, 8, and we have our physical memory. So obviously they have a page table with 4 entries each, process 1 and process 2. And you can see for process 2 EFGH. For process 2, page 0 is in physical frame 7, right? Page 1 is in physical frame 4, right? Page 3 is in physical frame 5, so on, right? Right. And likewise we have for the page table for process 1 also. A is in page 6, frame 6, sorry, right, frame 6. D is in frame 2, right, last entry for page table 1. C is in 3, frame 3, second last entry in page table 1. So now what we have is, a scenario is we have a request for B, right. We have a request for page B for process 1, and of course the first thing we do is we look up in the page table. Why? Because the page table has got the corresponding physical address. So we look at the entry and we see that the I, invalid bit, it's I, which means the page is not in memory, which means we have to go to the disk to grab that. Now when we go to the disk, and now fine, we decide we have to bring that disk into physical memory, we have to copy it to an appropriate physical frame. The question is, do we have a physical frame available? So kernel is occupying 2, rest all are also occupied. All the physical frames are occupied, which obviously means now we have to evict one of the already allocated frames. Now they could belong to the same process, process 1, or they could be from another process. So perhaps what we can do is evict one from process 2, right? So maybe evict E or F or G or H and then bring in B, right? So if we evict G, then for G the corresponding frame is, it's not written here, right? So EFGH, EFH are allocated. Yeah, kernel is also occupying them. But anyway, the way it would work is, whichever one you evacuate. So let's say you want to evacuate H, right? Page replacement H. So for H, you write it back to disk, right? That's what you would need to do. For H, the frame number is 5, which means now 5 will be the frame number in which you will bring B in. So copy B page to frame 5, and then for the entry for B, add in 5. Okay, so this is how the process would work. You would have to identify the appropriate page that you want to evict, and then you have to write that page back to disk from physical memory, disk IO, and then for that page you have to go to its page table entry. There will be a frame number there that will give us a starting physical address. So that frame is the one which you allocate to the new page which you are bringing in, and so for that entry you bring in. So for that particular entry in the page table, you bring in that frame, right? So whichever that frame you are allocating, that frame number will be written in the entry for B. So in this way you can do the page replacement. Okay, so what's happening here is, to summarize, process 1 needs a page. It's not in the disk. It's not in the page table. It's not in physical memory. It has to be gotten from disk. It's a page fault. And then when we try to find an appropriate physical frame, we see all frames are taken. So we have to replace one of the pages. So based on the algorithm we go for, we can replace any one of these pages. Okay. Okay, now I am on slide 7. So this is just illustrating the process again. And now what we are saying is this page fault routine needs to include page replacement as well. So we had a page fault routine earlier. What happens in a page fault? So in the page fault, what happens is we try to load a page, and that page is not in main memory, and then we grab it from the disk, copy to the appropriate frame, make the change in the page table entry, map the page to the frame, and then restart the instruction. But now we have to, so that is a page fault routine. Now to that routine we have to include page replacement as well, because one of the steps in handling a page fault is finding the appropriate frame, physical frame. So we can have a scenario in which no frames are available. So in that case, we need to add the page replacement routine to the page fault routine. So we find the location of desired page on disk. We can do that, virtual address. Find a free frame. If there is a free frame, use it. If there is no free frame, use a page replacement algorithm, and that page replacement algorithm will help to find you a victim frame. So it will say which frame you should evict based on some algorithm, right? So once you decide the victim frame, then write that victim frame back to disk, change the page table, read the desired page into the newly freed frame, change the page table, restart user process. Okay, so all this should be clear. So what we note is, one performance overhead we note is, if no frames are free, 2 page transfers are required, one out and one in, right? So because what we have to do is, when we're bringing a page in and we're doing page replacement, then we have to bring that page in, and we also need to the page which is already in memory, we have to copy it to the disk, because the disk always contains the permanent copy. As it is very much possible, while the page was in physical memory, it would have gotten modified, right? So we do a page out, the victim page is written to disk, that's a page out, and after that the required page is paged in from disk to memory. So page out from page out of the victim page, which has to be replaced from memory to disk, and page in of the desired page which we need to access, which caused the page fault and page replacement, page in of that page from disk to main memory. So naturally this means we have two page transfers are required, one from disk to memory, other from memory to disk. So of course this is a major overhead, and turns out that we can do one performance optimization to reduce this particular overhead. And what is that performance optimization? So we see whether while the page was within memory, living in memory, was memory resident. We're talking about the page which is to be evicted. So while that page was memory resident in main memory, was it modified or not? Okay, so if it was an instruction page, it was probably it was not modified. If it is a database, there's a chance it could have been modified. So if it has been modified, then what that essentially means is that the disk copy of the page and the main memory copy of the page are different. So in that case, we have to make the disk copy up to date. So we have to do a main memory to disk copy. However, if the page which was in memory, the one which we want to evict, if that page has not been modified, then the disk already contains the up-to-date copy. So in that case, no transfer from memory to disk. So in other words, if the page has been modified, we have no option but to have two transfers: a page out from main memory to disk of the evicted page, and a page in of the new page from reverse way from the disk to memory. If the page has not been modified, only a page in from disk to main memory. No page out of the evicted page from main memory to disk, because the disk already has an up-to-date copy, because the page was not modified while it was living in memory. Okay. So using this optimization, we can get a good performance if the page has not been modified while in memory. Okay. So now I am on slide 8. This is just showing the swap in and swap out, which we just talked about. So first step is, of course, we have to swap out the victim page. So the swap out has to happen before the swap in, because if we do the swap in first, then and if the page has been modified, then we lose all the data. Then our disk copy is an old or obsolete or stale one. So we have to do the swap out first. So swap out victim page. Now this frame is available. Swap in desired page and map to that new physical frame. Okay. So when you swap out the victim page, the entry in the page table, corresponding entry in the page table will be invalid, because now that page is not in memory. And when you swap in the desired page, then for that page in the page table, the entry will have its valid bit set. Right? So that's what we are seeing. Swap out victim page. Let's say page X, and for that now that page X will have an entry in the page table, set the valid invalid bit as invalid. Okay. And now bring the new page in, page Y. Page Y will have a page table entry. In that now what will be the frame number? F. The F was the same frame which had the earlier page you evicted, page X. So that's F, and the valid invalid bit is set as V. Well, you can have just one bit. So 1 indicates the page is in memory, 0 indicates it's not in memory. Now this is just showing the process of page replacement, the swap in and swap out, and the changes that you have to make in the page table. So for the page you are swapping out, its frame number is now 0, or any X or whatever we want to call it, any non-valid value for a frame number, and invalid. New page that you're bringing in, frame number is the same frame number that was mapped to the previous page which you evicted, F in this case, and the entry is now valid. Okay. Okay, now I am on slide number 9, and now we will talk about page replacement algorithms. So this slide 9 just discusses an optimization that we can do, one which we talked about earlier, to cut down on the number of swap outs that we have to do of the evicted page from the main memory to the disk. Right. So what we're saying, as we said, was if the page has been modified while it was in memory, if the evicted page has been modified while it was in memory, then we page it out back to disk, write it back to disk. If it was not modified, we don't write it back out to disk. Then the new page overwrites the new page which we are bringing in overwrites the old page in the physical memory. Okay. So because anyway the disk has the latest copy. So optimization is based on this observation. We read in a page from disk and then later write it back to disk. If the page has not been modified while it was in memory, do we need to write it back to disk? No, right? Because as the disk already has a correct copy. So this optimization is implemented by associating a modify or what we call dirty bit with each page. So this will be one bit in the page table entry. So page table entry, the most important piece of information it will contain is the base physical address, and then it has a lot of other spare bits. One of the bits could be for valid invalid, other bit could be for modify or dirty. So this bit is set for a page when something is written to a page, indicating that the page has been modified since it was read from the disk. We write the page back to the disk only if its modified bit has been set. Yeah, because if the modified bit has been set, it means that the memory version of the page and the disk version of the page are not the same, they're different. Okay. So advantage just reduces the IO time by half if the page has not been modified. Right. So of course, if we have a read-only page, then we're not going to be modifying it. So we don't have to write it back to disk. So if the page has not been modified, then we don't write it back to disk, and then we straight away whatever new page we have, we use that, and using that, so that new page overwrites over the evicted page, because anyway the disk has a copy of that page. Okay. So whatever that 4K page size is there, we just overwrite if the evicted page was not modified. If it's modified, then of course we have to page it out before we bring the new page in. Okay. Okay, now I am on slide 10, and just one or two slides we will spend on introducing page replacement. Actual page replacement algorithms we will be covering them in the next lecture. Okay. So now we talk about page replacement algorithms. So how do we evaluate a page replacement algorithm? We evaluate it by running it or executing it on a particular string of memory references and computing number of page faults. So eventually what I have is I've got a string, a set of memory references, right, which would correspond to the virtual addresses. So from each virtual address, what I would do is extract the page number. So we know the P and D part, right? If we, from the last chapter we saw, if you have a 32-bit virtual address and page size is 4K, we need 12 bits for that. Then 32 minus 12, 20. So 20 bits are reserved for page number, right? So we can have 2 raised to 20 pages. So from the given virtual address, we extract the page number, right? And then of course we look it up the page table, get the corresponding F part of the physical address, and then offset remains same. Now we have our physical address. So we're given a string of memory references, virtual addresses, and then from each virtual address or memory reference we extract the page number. That's all what we're going to use. So the way it's going to be is we're given a set of memory references, and then from that we extract or derive the page numbers, right? And then that means we're accessing a set of pages, and then we have a number of physical frames available, right? And for each page that we access, we have to allocate it to a physical frame, of course. So what will happen is, when we have a page access, either the appropriate a physical frame will be available, the mapping will be there, or it will not. Mapping is not there, then and we don't have any free frame, then we have a page fault. So how we measure the performance of the algorithm is, we count the number of page faults for a particular set of page references. So like we'll have a slot, let's say a slot of 10 physical frames, and then we'll refer to pages one by one, and each page we'll allocate to a frame. Once all the frames are taken, now if we have a request for a new page, right, which has not been allocated to a frame, all the frames are taken, now we have a page fault. So for each algorithm, we try to determine the number of page faults. So this string of memory references is called a reference string. And in order to make things simple, and in order to focus on the page replacement algorithm, we make some observations regarding this reference string of memory references. For simplicity, we focus on the page number and not the actual memory address, right? So we only look at the page number. In actuality, it's a part of an address. Another observation is, if we have a reference to page P, right, page number P, then any references to P that immediately follow will never cause a page fault. Why? Because if we have a reference to page P and it causes a page fault, then obviously we bring that page P into the physical memory. So we map it to a physical frame, which means if we have if the very next request, or if the next set of requests are all for the same page, then obviously they will not cause a page fault, and we will sort of remove them from the list of accesses, just to make things simple. Because the page P has already been brought in, so it's obvious that an immediate request for P right after that will not cause a page fault. So let's say we have 4 requests in sequence, P, P, P and P, all for page P. First request may cause a page fault, and then the next 3 will not. So this is only when they're consecutive. So we have this address sequence: 100, 432, 101, 612, 102, 103, 104, 101. So this evaluates to 14161, 6161, 61. So from 0100, we say the first 2 digits are page number, so page number 1. And then from 0432, page number 4. And then 0101, page number 1, 0612, page number 6. So now we're seeing 0102 and 0103 and 0104 and 0101, 0611. Right, so these are all, from here we get the page numbers. So we have 1416, 1, and then you see for 1 we have a bunch of references for page 1. So address 102, address 103, address 104, address 101. 4 references, 102, 103, 104, 101. So all of these 4 addresses correspond to the same page, which is page 1. So we just replace all these 4 with just 1, page 1. Okay. So in this way, our address sequence evaluates to this. So we are doing 2 things. We are extracting the page number, and for consecutive memory access to the same page number, we are only writing the page number once. Okay. So now the question is, given this memory sequence, how many page faults do we have if we allocate 3 frames or 1 frame? Okay. So think about it. if we have this memory sequence, and how many page faults if we allocate 3 frames and 1 frame. Okay, so in the next slide we'll discuss the solution. Okay, so if you want, you can pause it, work on it on your own. The problem is these are the page references, and we have available 2 scenarios. In one scenario 3 frames. How many page faults will we have? And then in the second scenario, if we have only 1 frame. So intuitively, we will have a larger number of page faults for which scenario? Looks like it will be for number 1, scenario 2, 1 frame, because smaller number of physical frames are available. More physical frames available means lesser page faults in general. So think about it, we'll just discuss the solution. Okay, so now I am on slide 11, and now we discuss the solution for this page replacement problem. So this is our address sequence given, all virtual addresses, and we say that the sequence evaluates to 14161616161. So here how we did the calculation was, we are assuming 100 bytes per page. So this is all. These addresses are all a long array of virtual addresses, right? And we know that each address can points to how much data? 1 byte, right? So which means if our page is of 100 bytes, so we have how many of these memory locations? 100 of them. 100 bytes per page. So 100 locations, 1 location per byte. So if it's in an array, so the way it will work is memory addresses 0 to 99 correspond to page 0. Memory addresses 100 to 199 correspond to page 1. Memory addresses 200 to 299 correspond to page 2. Memory addresses 300 to 399 correspond to page 3. Right? So 609 corresponds to page 6. Yeah, so like that this works. So therefore 100 for 100 the page number is page 1. For 609 it's page 6. So this is how we extrapolate the page numbers from the addresses. Okay. And of course consecutive, if we have consecutive accesses to the same page, we write the page number only once. So we can see here 102 followed by 103 followed by 104 followed by 101. So for all these 4 accesses we only write page number 1 just to shorten the reference string. So now this is the reference string 14161616161. So now how many page faults if we allocate 3 frames and 1 frame? So if you have 3 frames, what happens? So we see the solution. We access page. So initially because it's demand paging, initially no page has been allocated to a frame. Now when we access the first page 1, we have 3 frames available. We allocate 1 to the first frame. We map between the page and frame. And next we have an access. So that causes a page fault because page 1 has been not allotted to a physical frame. It's not in memory. So that causes our first page fault. Second page fault is caused when in the very next reference to page 4. Page 4 is also not memory resident. So then we have a page fault and we allocate page 4 to the second frame. Yeah, so here we are not naming the frames. Ideally we should. Yeah, so page 4 allotted to frame 1, page 1 allotted to frame 0. Next reference is for page 1. Page 1 is already in memory, right? No page fault. Fourth reference is to page 6. Again, so now page 6, is it in memory? It's not, so we have a page fault and we bring page 6 into memory. So at this point, so again if you look at the whole string, how many pages, different pages are we accessing? 3, 1, 4 and 6. Now if you look at the memory contents of the page frames, all of them, all these three pages have been mapped to appropriate physical frames. So from this point onwards, we don't have any more page faults. After the first reference to 6, we have no more page faults. We refer to page 1, it's in memory, page 6 memory, page 1 in memory, page 6 memory, 1 memory, 6 memory, and 1 memory. So 3 page faults. Now for case B, if you have one frame, well then this is the worst case, because every memory reference will or every page reference will lead to a page fault. We refer to page 1, not in memory, page fault. 4, not in memory, we bring 4 in, assign 4 to that frame. Again 1, page fault. Again 6, page fault. So each and every memory reference will, or each and every page reference will result in a page fault. 11 of these references, so 11 page faults. And because at any given point of time we can only map one page to the frame. So here note that these consecutive accesses to the same frame, we are not taking them into account. So if those happen, at least those will not cause a page fault. Right. So if we have one in when we have for 102, right, when the first access for 102, we bring page 1, this will result in a page fault. Now we bring page 1 in to memory allotted to the frame, then 103 will not cause a fault, 104 will not cause a fault, 101 will not cause a fault. But in our reduced string, every access will cause a fault. Okay, so the pattern is easy to see. If we have a very small number of frames, we'll have more page faults in general. Larger frame, more frames we have, less page faults. More frames equates to more physical memory. Okay. So now I am on the last slide, slide 12, and here we're just showing a graph. What is on the x-axis? Number of available physical frames. What is on the y-axis? Number of page faults. So if we increase the number of frames, intuitively we expect that number of page faults will reduce, because now our frame pool is larger, so we have a higher probability of finding an appropriate frame for a new page that we are trying to bring in. If we have smaller number of frames, our probability of finding a free frame, it obviously reduces. So in general, what we see so initially with one frame we are getting 15 faults. With 2 frames we have 7 faults, and then as we keep on adding frames, at 5 frames we have 4 faults, and then after a while it sort of evens out, sort of becomes constant. Okay. So in general, more a larger amount of physical memory translates to larger number of available physical frames, which in general translates to smaller number of page faults. So I hope this should be easy to see. Okay.